Lu Sheng closed his eyes, placed his hand over his chest and bowed to Yang Yizhuo as a form of respect, and with a curious expression asked what was his martial path. He had seen the domain of Wang Qiandu and Yefeng but not that of Yang Yizhuo. Yang Yizhuo began to gaze at the ground in silence, and then a smile spread across his face. Upon noticing this, Lu Sheng's attention fixed on him. Not long after, Yang Yizhuo decided to show Lu Sheng his martial path, and while his body was surrounded by green martial energy, he extended his hand. With a joyful expression, Yang Yizhuo began to control the wind. Lu Sheng, who was standing in front, remained silently observing attentively. Not long after, Yang Yizhuo's energy transformed into a Go board. Lu Sheng's attention was fixed on it and his eyes widened in surprise and confusion. Then Yang Yizhuo picked up one of the Go pieces, and while his eyes were shining with seriousness, with a smile he made his move and placed the piece on the board, revealing that everything Lu Sheng had seen was his domain. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in fear and surprise. He was in shock as he could not believe that this vast world, which was a grand creation, was Yang Yizhuo's domain. With a sincere gaze, Yang Yizhuo turned to the side and revealed that after this game of Go he was going to reveal some secrets. Lu Sheng remained silent, not knowing what to say. Yang Yizhuo turned his back on our boy and began walking alongside Wang Qiandu and Ye Feng and asked Lu Sheng to follow them. Lu Sheng's attention was fixed on them, making him feel confused since he didn't know what was happening. He decided to listen to the master and they all started walking under the starry sky in silence. Several seconds later, with eyes shining with seriousness, they stopped walking. Yang Yizhuo closed his eyes, concentrated and extended his hand to one side, causing blue martial energy to begin to emerge from his body. In the blink of an eye, Yang Yizhuo created 5 lava planets in the sky. Lu Sheng, who was standing behind, remained silent. He raised his head and while his eyes were shining with sincerity, he revealed that those planets had already perished in the calamity and Lu Sheng's world was facing the same destruction. With a curious gaze, Lu Sheng asked if the beasts from another world were really that terrifying, and if someone powerful like a master couldn't stop them. All the planets were floating in the sky, with a serious gaze. Yang Yizhuo, who had his arms behind his back, turned toward Lu Sheng and our boy soon realized that the invasion of the beasts was not as simple as he thought, and the world they came from was not just any world. Yang Yizhuo closed his eyes, concentrated and began to move his hand, causing a strange energy to appear in the sky. Yang Yizhuo began to observe it and revealed that it was the dark side of countless material universes, the source of all evil, the concentration of all negative energy. The beasts Lu Sheng had seen were only the most superficial manifestation of that power. Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine with rage and fear, realizing that it was the negative energy of countless material universes, and now a single universe had to bear it, being an unstoppable calamity. Yang Yizhuo's eyes began to shine with seriousness. He turned his back on Lu Sheng and mentioned that the most crucial thing was that, once this force appeared in Lu Sheng's universe, it would mean that the true end of his universe was near. Lu Sheng began to ponder in silence, and then, with a confused gaze, asked why that was going to happen. Since then, an apple appeared in Yang Yizhuo's hand. With a serene expression, he made clear that the reason was simple. Lu Sheng's attention was fixed on the apple and his eyes widened with curiosity. Using his fingers, Yang Yizhuo cut the apple in half and showed it to Lu Sheng. The reality was that the apple was contaminated. Lu Sheng began to observe carefully and his eyes widened in surprise upon realizing that once this force corrupted, it was like the beginning of putrefaction. No matter what was done, at most it could only be delayed. Yang Yizhuo tightly grabbed the apple and with a sincere gaze nodded his head. Lu Sheng clenched his fists and with a confused gaze began to wonder what meaning his actions had now, since not even the level 15 and 16 masters could stop the calamity. Yang Yizhuo revealed that everything had already begun and the fate was sealed. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng could not help but wonder what he could do. Yang Yizhuo and the others turned their backs on Lu Sheng. Our boy clenched his fists and began to gaze at the ground. At that moment, Lu Sheng was dejected. Although he never underestimated himself, he was neither blind nor arrogant. The 3 people in front of him were infinitely more powerful. It could be said that in the future his achievements would not be inferior to theirs, But if even they could not manage to do it, how could Lu Sheng do better alone? His eyes began to shine with honesty. He was an ordinary person, and when he learned that his world would be destroyed in 10,000 years, he thought that he could still keep fighting a little longer. But the destruction of the universe was something too big, so there was nothing he could do. With eyes shining with joy, Wang Qiu and Duan Yefeng turned around while Yang Yizhuo continued turning his back on our boy. Lu Sheng began to look at his master and mentioned that recently he had witnessed the level 15 demand, even 16. According to him, it was majestic and resplendent. But now they were telling him that all that effort in the end led only to a dead end. Everything was in vain. With a curious expression, Yang Yizhuo turned around and asked if Lu Sheng was afraid. With eyes shining with confusion, Lu Sheng lowered his head and admitted to being a little scared. Just then, the apple that Yang Yizhuo was holding in his hand began to burn, and not long after, the flames consumed it. Yang Yizhuo's eyes began to shine with confidence, and with a smile he couldn't believe that Lu Sheng, who once thought about surviving among death and looked like the spark capable of holding up the sky with one hand, was now afraid. Just then, Lu Sheng's eyes widened in surprise. Plunging his fist, Lu Sheng began to imagine the system windows and his mind filled with confusion. He didn't know if all of this had been a plan by Yang Yizhuo. Realizing that all of this had been a test, in a certain sense, the system did not lie. That was the true future of the universe. With a smile, Yang Yizhuo turned around, extended his hand toward Lu Sheng and mentioned that, before Lu Sheng was just an ordinary high school student who had not started the martial path, and still had the determination to save the world. Now he was millions of times stronger than back then, and faced with the same supreme calamity, now he wanted to retreat. With a joyful gaze, Wang Qi and Duan Yefeng began to show a smile. Yang Yizhuo closed his eyes and a smile spread across his face. He asked Lu Sheng not to forget that he had their support. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in surprise and he began to ponder in silence. With a sincere expression, he admitted that before he was useless but dared to do anything, and now being millions of times stronger, he had become a coward. With eyes shining with rage, Lu Sheng clenched his fist, realizing that the stronger a warrior was, the smaller their determination. With a curious gaze, Yang Yizhuo asked if Lu Sheng had understood and if he had regained his confidence. With a smile, Lu Sheng began to touch his head, looked away, and with a nervous expression said that he had not regained confidence. But he knew that with the help of his masters, at least he would be able to advance a few steps more than them. With eyes shining with determination, he decided to check if this catastrophe was truly unstoppable. Upon hearing this, the eyes of Yang Yizhuo and the others widened in surprise and their jaws dropped in shock. They could not help but smile and feel joyful. With a proud smile, Yang Yizhuo mentioned that he had hundreds of millions of disciples. Upon hearing this, Wang Qiu's and Duan Yefeng's attention focused on him. Yang Yizhuo touched Lu Sheng's chest and made it clear that among the millions of disciples he had, the one he was most proud of was Lu Sheng. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng's eyes filled with surprise. He couldn't help but smile and feel happy to see that he had been recognized by his master. Wang Qiu crossed his arms and passed by Lu Sheng, while on the other side, with a smile, Duan Yefeng placed his hand on his shoulder. They stood around Lu Sheng, and now that our boy was willing to take a few steps forward, they decided to help him with all their strength. With a confused gaze, Lu Sheng began to turn his head from side to side. Wang Qiu focused and a powerful martial energy began to emerge from his body. His domain, the domain of the stars, was now complete and he was going to give it to Lu Sheng. Wang Qi used his power and his energy shot out towards Lu Sheng. Little by little it began to enter Lu Sheng's body, causing him terrible pain. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in confusion and fear. He did not know if he was going to die. The energy fused with Lu Sheng's body. With a surprised gaze, he realized that this was infinite fire. This was completely different from what he had learned before. At this moment, Wang Qiu had just given him his level 15 martial arts knowledge without reservations. Duan Yefeng also focused and a crystal ball appeared in his hands. His younger fellow disciple had transmitted everything he knew to Lu Sheng. So as the more experienced disciple, he could not fall behind. He decided to give Lu Sheng his divine crystal domain. The energy of Duan Yefeng also began to enter Lu Sheng's body. Our boy opened his mouth and began to scream in pain. Their energies began to emerge from Lu Sheng's body. His attention was fixed on his hands. This was the ultimate edge, the light of divinity. He had obtained 2 level 15 domains. With a smile, Yang Yizhou began to touch his chin and mentioned that it was still a little early for Lu Sheng to receive his domain. He reached out his hand to Lu Sheng and touched his forehead, causing his eyes to widen in surprise. Yang Yizhou's energy entered Lu Sheng's body, and he appeared in space. Yang Yizhou had given him a universe. Lu Sheng was paralyzed with shock as he did not know what was happening. With eyes shining with joy, Yang Yizhou began to show a smile. He hoped that Lu Sheng could obtain what he desired. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part.
Lan's attention was fixed on Lu Sheng and his eyes widened with curiosity. His device for calculating strength showed that Lu Sheng had a stellar combat value of 135 points, but he was still level 9. Lan wondered since when the Crimson Eye Star pirate gang had members of this level, which made him assume he must be a newcomer. With eyes shining with rage and his body surrounded by golden martial energy, Lu Sheng tightly clenched his fist and began to stare silently at Lan. Lu Sheng focused and surrounded by flames, shot towards Lan, ready to attack. Seeing this, Lan activated his power, making blue martial energy appear around his body. Lan began to touch his mask and an excited smile spread across his face upon noticing that Lu Sheng's combat value had already surpassed 1000 points. It seemed to him an incredibly interesting fact that someone of only level 9 could reach this amount of star power. With this, it no longer surprised him at all that Crimson Eye had recruited him. Lu Sheng, surrounded by fire, began to advance quickly toward Lan, ready to finish him off. Lan stood still and began to observe in silence. Several seconds later, his eyes widened in surprise, leaving him in shock. He couldn't believe that Lu Sheng's combat value had surpassed 10,000. And to his greatest astonishment, he noticed that the figure kept increasing the closer our boy got. The device continued calculating Lu Sheng's combat value. It went from 10,000 to 40,000, leaving Lan speechless. Several seconds later, it reached 50,000 and not long after, Lan's mask began to crack as Lu Sheng's combat value had already surpassed 90,000 star points. Lan's mask began to break into pieces, revealing his true face. He had a scar on his eye. His attention was fixed on Lu Sheng and his mind was filled with confusion and surprise. He didn't know what was happening or who he was. The device that was calculating Lu Sheng's strength started malfunctioning and several windows appeared reporting that the system was failing. At that moment, Lu Sheng appeared in front of Lan and with eyes shining with rage, began to stare at him intently with a murderous gaze and prepared to attack. Lan raised his head and upon seeing this, could not help but panic, knowing that this was not good. With an angry expression, he could not help but wonder what kind of joke this was. He could not believe that someone had a power that exceeded the evaluation limit, having surpassed 10,000 points while only being level 9. This seemed simply absurd to him. Lu Sheng jumped and concentrated his energy. With eyes shining, he decided to use the ancient fist technique from the 5th era called Heavenly and Earthly Furnace, making a powerful burning sun appear behind him. Lan was paralyzed with fear since he had never seen such a powerful technique before. Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine with rage. Lan had broken his spaceship and now had to pay him. Not long after, Lu Sheng's body transformed into a powerful fire phoenix, which began to flap its wings and roar. Lan's attention was fixed on it and his mind filled with surprise. He decided not to stand idly by, and while his body was releasing martial energy, he began to draw his sword. Just before Lu Sheng's fist could land the impact, Lan drew his sword and blocked the attack. Lu Sheng decided not to hold back and used all his strength. But Lan stood firm and was able to block the attack. The combat was so fierce that a wave of energy began to spread throughout the space. With a gaze full of determination, Lu Sheng focused and struck again, making red energy emerge from his body. Using the sword, Lan was able to block the attack. He clenched his teeth and his eyes widened in fear and surprise. He couldn't believe that he needed to use all his strength just to stop him and wondered since when did Star Pirates have such a powerful member. Veins appeared on his face. Lan clenched his teeth and began to gaze toward the ground. According to him, star space parasites had to die. With eyes shining with determination, he began to stare at Lu Shang. Extended his hand and began to imbue his energy into the blade of the sword. Then he began to concentrate, and the rocks that were floating through outer space began to move. Lan extended his hand and a powerful flash began to emerge from it, and not long after, the rocks began to approach him. Upon seeing this, Lu Shang could not help but clench his teeth tightly and his eyes widened in surprise and fear, knowing that this was not good. The rocks exploded, creating a great explosion of martial energy which destroyed everything in its path and created a curtain of smoke. Lu Shang emerged from the curtain of smoke and using his feet stopped his moving body. The explosion had been powerful, but Lu Shang did not have a single scratch. With a curious gaze, he began to observe his hands, realizing that this was the power of he was a true martial warrior, man. Times stronger than the star pirates he had eliminated with a single blow. He was, so far, the most powerful opponent he had encountered. Our boy placed his hand on his chest and his attention focused on Lan, making his eyes begin to shine with excitement, and a smile spread across his face, making it clear that the insult parasite did not matter to him in the slightest. For him, even if Lan were a level 11 warrior, if he broke other people's things without reason, he also had to pay. Lu Shang closed his eyes, extended his hands and concentrated, activating the martial god state. Not long after, a powerful golden flash began to emerge from his body. Lan's eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe that this was the power a level 9 should have. No. For him it was clear that his opponent was a being with an overhuman constitution and also of an extremely high level. With his body surrounded by martial flames, Lu Shang clenched his fists and began to advance quickly towards Lan. With an expression full of excitement and a smile, he decided it was time to use the form of the martial god. While little by little Lu Shang was getting closer, with a furious expression, Lan tightly grabbed his sword and cursed the star pirates. Both attacked, and their energies clashed with each other, creating a powerful shockwave. The combat was evenly matched. At the same time, somewhere else in the galaxy, a ship made a space jump, and not long after, it began to emerge from a blue portal. Inside the spaceship sat the guide, Lan Chang. He began to gaze toward the ground and felt relieved to have arrived just in time. He swore to himself that this time, when he returned, he would definitely switch to a level 11 ship. He remembered that the ship agent from star Z34548, YZen, owed him a favor for 82 years that had not yet been repaid, so he assumed he should be able to get a good price. Next to him stood Chao Lin with his arms behind his back. He remained silent, lost in thought. He began to observe space and mentioned that the law officer of his star zone, White Mist, had not yet arrived, but apparently the officer from star zone Yama was already present. Upon hearing this, a joyful smile spread across Lan Chang's face as now Lu Shang was saved. Lan Chang's ship was traveling at high speed through space. Not long after, a spaceship appeared in front of his ship. His attention fixed on it, and upon observing closely, he noticed that it had the maple leaf insignia. Indeed, it was the law enforcement officer from the Yama star zone. He rested his head on his hand, began to gaze toward the ground and let out a sigh. He realized that this level 12 ship was something he probably could not afford even working all his life, not even counting all the favors he had. With a serene gaze, Chao Lin mentioned that if he surpassed level 11 and was also chosen as a law officer, he could also have a ship. Then he laughed, adding that maybe his ship could be even more luxurious. Lan Chang raised his head and a smile spread across his face. For him, this was something even more unlikely than winning the grand prize of the stellar lottery. Just then, something caught their attention, making them freeze in fear. Chow Lin went into shock. While on the other side, Lan Chang's eyes widened with confusion and surprise. They were near the area where Lu Sheng was. In front of them, a powerful purple martial flash appeared. Their attention was fixed on it. Lan Chang stood up from his seat, not knowing what was happening. Lan Chang's ship began to shake. His eyes widened in surprise and fear upon realizing that this fluctuation he felt was, in fact, a battle between level 11 experts. The spaceship system began to analyze, and several seconds later, the system began to display a scan in which ship remains could be seen, realizing that what the scans show were the remains of the Demon Claw ship from the Crimson Eye Star pirate group. With a serene gaze, Chow Lin mentioned that the ship had been completely pulverized, and it seemed that the Crimson Eye pirates had really fallen. The combat was fierce, with bodies releasing martial energies. Lan and Lu Sheng began to attack each other. Chow Lin began to observe the battle carefully. He assumed that the person fighting outside, with that silver combat suit, must be the justice officer of the Yamu Star Zone. Lu Sheng moved quickly and appeared in front of Lan. Upon seeing this, his eyes widened in surprise. Lan had no time to react. Lu Sheng attacked with force, causing Lan's body to be thrown. With a surprise expression, Chow Lin realized that the golden humanoid figure was not Crimson Eye. But it was incredibly strong. Its power was by no means inferior to that of the justice officer, in fact. It even seemed terrifying and led him to wonder if perhaps he too was a member of the Star Pirates. With eyes shining with determination, Lan began to imbue his power into the sword and decided it was time to put an end to this battle. Just then, Lu Sheng appeared in front of him and grabbed him by the head. Upon noticing this, Lan couldn't help but panic. Lu Sheng began to attack quickly, and gave Lan some fierce punches to the chest. Lan began to scream in agony. Not long after, Lan lost consciousness. His face was full of blood and his eyes turned white. Lu Sheng, who was sweating, let out a sigh. With a serious gaze he turned around and began to observe Lan Cheng's spaceship. Upon seeing this, Lan Cheng's eyes widened in surprise, realizing that he was Lu Sheng. With a nervous expression, he slapped himself. Chow Lin's attention fixed on him. With a curious gaze he asked what he was doing. Lan Cheng approached Chow Lin, grabbed his hand and asked him to give him a really strong slap since he suspected that he was dreaming. Chow Lin became confused. With a sincere gaze, Lan Cheng began to observe the hands and mentioned that he was going crazy. Chow Lin began to concentrate his energy in his hand and decided to listen to him. Without wasting any more time, he gave Lan Cheng a strong slap on the face. The blow was so strong that Lan Cheng's body flew off and crashed hard against the wall. With eyes full of tears, Lan Cheng put his hand over his cheek. Chow Lin waved his hands in denial and with a serious look made it clear that it had been Lan Cheng himself who had asked him to hit him, sincerely admitting that in all his life he had never heard such a request as this one. Lan Cheng cracked his neck and with a furious gaze called Chow Lin a bastard. He shouted that he had told him to make it strong, but not to use all his strength. To top it off, that scoundrel had even used a level 10 martial technique. He started tapping the spaceship window and decided to forget about it, since he wasn't going to argue over those details. He began pointing at Lu Sheng with his finger and with a sincere gaze asked him if he would believe that the person who was fighting against the justice officer was, in fact, Lu Sheng. Upon hearing this, Chow Lin's eyes widened in surprise and fear, leaving him in shock. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part. A woman sat in front of the ship's system and began to navigate through the central computer to try to recover Frando and Gishi's ships. Her eyes widened in confusion and she couldn't help but sweat. She couldn't believe what was happening. Several red windows appeared on the computer, and a message from the system revealed that data recovery had stopped. The woman became confused and started typing. She didn't know why it had stopped. The leader approached her and his attention was fixed on the computer. With a serious expression he asked if there was any problem. Her eyes began to shine with fear when she revealed that someone was preventing the return of the ship. With a gaze full of confidence, she mentioned that it must be the natives of the planet. She assumed that, possessing level 9 strength, they had found the ship that transported them and now considered it their treasure. Which is why they did not want to let it go. Upon hearing this, the leader's eyes began to shine with excitement. He started touching his chin and with a smile gave her the order to kill them. Upon hearing the order, she pressed the red button and decided to fire the gamma particle cannon immediately. Not long after, their eyes widened in surprise and confusion, leaving them in shock. They could not believe what their eyes were witnessing. The hand of Lu Sheng's martial spirit tightly grabbed Frando's ship, preventing it from flying away. The leader's attention was fixed on it, and he began to ponder silently. With eyes shining with confusion, he began to scream as he could not believe that the spaceship had been caught by a warrior's martial spirit. But just then, the powerful martial spirit of Lu Sheng, which was surrounded by suffocating martial energy, tightly clenched its fist, destroying Frando's spaceship without leaving a trace. Inside the martial spirit was Lu Sheng, with his body surrounded by martial energy and his eyes shining with tranquility. The leader's attention focused on him. Realizing that he was the one who had summoned such a powerful martial spirit, sensing that someone was watching him. With a murderous gaze, Lu Sheng turned around and began to stare intently in the direction where the leader's ship was located. The screen began to show a photograph of Lu Sheng. Crimson Eye felt somewhat surprise. He realized that power, despite being only level 9, could already compete with the power of a level 10 ship, and that his physical strength was comparable to that of a body of the same level. Upon feeling Lu Sheng's gaze, the leader's eyes widened in fear and he couldn't help but sweat, realizing that Lu Sheng had an extraordinary physical constitution. With an excited expression, he clenched his fist and with a smile asked the woman if she knew the value that a slave like Lu Sheng would reach in black crystal coins. The woman began to observe him silently, not knowing what to say. Crimson Eye's eyes began to shine with malice and a smile spread across his face when he revealed that, at the highest level auction house of the Yamu Star sector, the genius with an extraordinary physical constitution of Dawn Star level had once been auctioned off, and that the final price had reached the exorbitant figure of 1 billion. Upon hearing this, the woman's face filled with shock and her jaw dropped in surprise. She couldn't believe that a slave could be worth so much. He began to touch his chin and couldn't help but smile, as he realized that by just capturing him, he could buy several low-level life planets. He began to carefully observe the system window, realizing that judging by his performance, Lu Sheng was worth at least the same as a Dawn Star level. With an expression full of excitement, he reached out toward the system window. His eyes began to shine with malice and an excited smile spread across his face, since according to him, the value of a single person like Lu Sheng was equivalent to looting 100 planets of inferior civilizations. The woman approached him and, with a worried expression, asked him if the disappearance of Iji and the others might not have been caused by Lu Sheng. He began to gaze toward the ground and could not help but smile. The woman began to observe him closely. Not knowing what he had in mind, he began to stare at her and with a confident smile made it clear that no longer mattered. He was the possessor of an extraordinary physical constitution of Morning Star level, whose strength was only level 9, and in that region of space there was no existence above level 10. He placed his hand on her shoulder, extended the other one and with an expression full of emotion asked Venomous Scorpion if she knew what this was called, revealing that it was a gift the cosmos had given them, a predestined opportunity, and an incredible stroke of luck. His eyes began to shine. He knew better than anyone that it would be a disgrace if they didn't capture Lu Sheng, so he gave her the order to immediately send out the demonic silver guards. He started to touch his chin and began to ponder. Suddenly he realized that this action could allow Lu Sheng to escape. Using his power, he disappeared from the place and decided it was better to take care of it personally. He asked her to operate the ship to help him capture him, warning her to be very careful not to hurt his golden bun. The woman remained silent, without saying a single word, then her attention fixed on the system window. She couldn't believe that a slave like Lu Sheng was so valuable. She put her hand over her chest and her mind filled with worry. She felt uneasy and wondered if the cause was not knowing whether she and the others were dead or alive. A feeling she could not fully understand. She turned around and decided to forget about the matter since, with the power of Crimson Eye, which was almost level 11, and the support of the level 11 ship, it would be the joke of the century if she couldn't subdue a simple level 9 warrior. At the same time, near the blue star, someone was flying at high speed. It was none other than Lu Sheng. His eyes were shining with excitement. He wanted Crimson Eye to come as soon as possible. With a curious expression, he turned around. Since he couldn't wait to feel how powerful that almost level 11 force was. The spaceship of Crimson Eye made a space jump and appeared in the galaxy where Lu Sheng's planet was. Inside the ship was Crimson Eye sitting controlling the ship, wondering what it meant that 1 billion black crystal coins seemed to beckon him. His eyes expanded with confidence and a joyful smile appeared on his face, because for him, that fortune represented resources, power, status and even freedom. With a joyful look, he clenched his fist tightly, for he knew that not only would he have more chances to ascend to level 11, but he could also cleanse his sins and live openly on a planet of a superior civilization. While his ship sailed at high speed, passing by the planets, he felt that the transition from being an infamous space pirate to becoming a true aristocrat of the cosmos was within reach. His ship was getting closer and closer to Lu Sheng, going from being 1,000 kilometers away to just 300. Just then, a system warning appeared. His attention fixed on it and his eyes filled with confusion as he realized that his spaceship, Demon Claw level 11 had just issued a danger alert. Far from feeling fear, a stubborn smile appeared on his face. He found it interesting that a simple level 9 warrior with an extraordinary constitution could be so threatening. In his opinion, the stronger the potential, the more valuable it was, and he considered that it would be even more satisfying to tame such an indomitable genius. Not long after, his ship began to approach Lu Sheng's planet. Our boy who was flying in space began to observe the ship in silence. Crimson Eye came out of his spaceship and appeared in front of Lu Sheng. He couldn't help but smile when he saw that the brat was waiting for him. He couldn't believe that Lu Sheng wasn't afraid of death. For him, Lu Sheng was incredible. He managed to make him feel the tension of a life or death battle, almost as if he were facing an expert of his same level. This truly excited him, so he finally asked what his name was. With his body surrounded by martial energy, Lu Sheng remained silent, without saying a single word. Lu Sheng approached him and introduced himself, saying it was time to stop talking. Upon hearing this, the leader couldn't help but feel excited and adopted an offensive stance. Lu Sheng's attention was fixed on him and his eyes filled with confusion. He did not know what it was that he had in mind. With an evil expression, Crimson Eye joined his hands and began to summon a powerful black martial ball. With a smile, he revealed that Lu Sheng was worthy of receiving it with that strength. Lu Sheng began to observe carefully and his mind filled with fear, not knowing what was happening. Crimson Eye summoned a powerful tornado of energy and with a smile began to stare at Lu Sheng, realizing that he was afraid. He mocked him, claiming that a mere level 9 could not be a threat and promised him it wouldn't hurt much, since everything would end in an instant. He launched the powerful tornado of energy toward Lu Sheng. Instead of feeling fear, Lu Sheng remained silent. His eyes filled with fear, and he couldn't help but clench his teeth tightly, realizing that this was level 11 power. Without wasting any more time, Lu Sheng forcefully struck the tornado of energy. Not long after, a powerful martial energy shot out from his fist and reached Crimson Eye. He clenched his teeth tightly and his eyes filled with surprise. For him, this was impossible, since his opponent was only level 9. Lu Sheng's energy began to scorch his body. He started screaming and went crazy, because according to him this was impossible. Lu Sheng's attack was so powerful that it blew up the nearby moon into pieces. Back on Crimson Eye's spaceship, the system began to reveal that he had died. Upon seeing this, the woman panicked because according to her this was impossible. Her eyes widened in surprise and terror as she processed the incredible truth. The level 10 leader had died, killed with a single blow by an extraordinary level 9 martial artist. With his body surrounded by energy, Lu Sheng moved away from the moon, which was now shattered. With an angry expression, Lu Sheng began to touch his head. Unintentionally he had also destroyed the moon. He didn't know what to do now for the Mid-Autumn Festival. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, the area was devastated and Lu Shang's energy was all over the space. With a serene gaze, Lu Shang clenched his fist. He remembered that it was said this opponent was a level 10 expert, 20 times stronger than the evil falcon. However, he had killed him with just one touch, and this seemed boring to him. His eyes began to shine with excitement as he started to recall his battle against Lan Chen. He remembered that, before receiving the inheritance, when he was still at level 8, he had already been able to fight on equal terms against Lan Chen, who was level 10. While martial energy was emerging from his hand, Lu Shang began to observe his palm carefully. Lu Shang tightly clenched his fist and his attention was fixed on it. He was somewhat surprised to have been able to kill a level 10 warrior with a single blow, and he understood that, indeed, it was not that his opponent was too weak, but that he himself was too strong. Lu Shang turned around and his attention focused on the remains of the moon. Our boy extended his hand toward the moon and his eyes widened with seriousness. He decided to fix this disaster first. He began to use his powers and repair the moon. Our boy couldn't help but smile as he was pleased with the result. Just then, a strange energy appeared in space. Lu Shang's eyes widened with curiosity, making him turn around. He didn't know what was happening. The spaceship of Crimson Eye fired a powerful purple laser beam, which began to advance quickly toward Lu Shang. Our boy had no time to react, and the laser beam hit his body directly, creating a great explosion. The subordinate of Crimson Eye, who was inside the ship, was the one who had activated the laser, and while the laser was impacting against Lu Shang's body, she began to observe in silence. Her eyes were shining with confidence. According to her, this was an annihilation level 11 shot at maximum power, and she didn't believe he would survive. Several seconds later, once the curtain of smoke created by the explosion began to disappear, Lu Shang could be seen shirtless. This was the famous annihilation cannon, capable of instantly eliminating any being below level 11, even those at level 11 did not dare face it head-on. Her attention was fixed on Lu Shang and her eyes widened with joy and confidence. She was sure that he had died. The attack had been powerful since our boy had his body full of scratches, but he was still alive. He began to gaze toward the ground in silence. The attack had struck against his right chest. It had burned part of his skin and now the bones were visible. Despite having received so much damage, Lu Shang remained standing as if nothing had happened. The system began to show Lu Shang, and upon seeing that he was injured, the eyes of Crimson Eye's subordinate widened with joy and a smile spread across her face. According to her, Lu Shang deserved it and should go to the afterlife to keep her boss company. But at that moment, our boy focused and began to use the power of the immortal cells, which started to gather in his wounds. Lu Shang extended his arm and the cells began to regenerate his tissues and muscles. Despite feeling pain, he began to gaze toward the ground in silence. The woman's attention fixed on him and her mind filled with surprise. She did not know how this was possible. In a matter of seconds, Lu Shang's wounds healed. It was as if he had never been injured. While the immortal cells were healing his hand, our boy began to stare at her in silence, devising a plan. The woman placed her hands on the table and couldn't help but go into shock upon seeing that Lu Shang's wounds had completely healed. While our boy's eyes were shining with excitement, he began to stretch his arms and with a smile mentioned that the level 11 attack surprisingly contained a small portion of the power of rules. Even the current Star Supreme could not stop it. And this seemed interesting to him. The energy of Lu Shang appeared around the woman's body. She couldn't help but tremble and feel fear, realizing that Lu Shang was not a level 9 warrior. She didn't know what was happening or who Lu Shang was. A moment ago, when the Crimson Eye spaceship appeared behind Lu Shang, his attention focused on it and her eyes began to shine with excitement, making a smile appear on his face. 1 second before the spaceship launched the attack, Lu Shang had already detected it. But he felt that the threat was not high, so he decided to let himself be hit completely to test the strength of the Star Supreme, although the result was not entirely satisfactory for him. With an expression full of rage, the woman clenched her fist and pressed the button. She decided to activate maximum power fire. The ship's laser was reactivated. It began to charge energy and several seconds later, a powerful burst of energy shot out toward our boy. Lu Shang clenched his fist and while a powerful energy was emerging from it, he began to stare at it with an arrogant gaze and made it clear that he was not going to let the laser hit him again. Just before the burst of energy could impact Lu Shang, he counter-attacked using all his strength and struck the burst of energy. Lu Shang's fist struck directly against the energy blast and little by little the difference in strength began to become visible. Evil energy began to emerge from Lu Shang's body. The winner was Lu Shang since several seconds later, the energy blast disappeared completely, turning into a curtain of smoke. Upon seeing our boy's power, the woman fell to her knees on the ground and lowered her head before him. She did not know how this was possible. Her eyes were full of fear and confusion. She could not help but sweat, questioning whether human strength could really face a stellar weapon and if he, after this, could still be called human. With an expression full of fear, Poison Scorpion raised her head. She had witnessed with her own eyes the moment when a single punch had dispersed the level 11 annihilation cannon. For her, this was 10 times more shocking than seeing Crimson Eye die. The ship's screen began to show Lu Shang staring at her with a penetrating gaze. Upon seeing this, she couldn't help but panic. Lu Shang began to use his power, and not long after, blood started to emerge from her mouth and eyes. She was confused as she didn't know what was happening. Not long after, she fell to the ground and lost consciousness. Lu Shang's power was so powerful that blood was emerging from her eyes and mouth, causing her terrible pain. While she was writhing in pain, Lu Shang, whose body was surrounded by martial energy, appeared inside the spaceship and began to observe her closely in silence. His eyes began to shine with joy. He extended his hand and using his power picked up her bracelet. With a smile, he decided to keep the spoils of war. He observed that the energy crystals were more than double those of Frando and Gishi, realizing that this woman knew how to manage her resources well. Lu Shang approached the panels of the spaceship and began to examine them carefully. His eyes filled with surprise realizing that this was a high-level spaceship, and this was not bad at all. He checked that in this round he had obtained more than 11,800 tons of energy crystals, 1/3 of which were black crystals, which he found very satisfying. His eyes began to shine with confidence and a smile spread across his face. With his own hands and hard work, he had been able to generate wealth. He wondered what it mattered if he came from a low-level civilization, reflecting that even if one were a poor boy coming from an inferior civilization, as long as one worked steadily on solid ground, one could also have a good life. Lu Shang put his hand under his chin and began to imagine Lan Cheng saying that this time Lu Shang could choose whatever he wanted from the treasure. He decided it was time to contact Lan Cheng. He considered that this group clearly belonged to interstellar pirates. He knew that Lan Cheng, as a guide, charged a protection fee every 10 years and theoretically also had the responsibility of protecting low-level planets from these types of invaders. After having made such an effort solving the problem for Lan Cheng, Lu Shang thought that at least she should give him a reward for this. At that moment, the spaceship's alert was activated and the system reported that the ship had been blocked by an unknown energy source. Upon hearing this, Lu Shang's eyes filled with surprise, causing him to turn around. Just then, someone fired a powerful burst of energy which hit the spaceship directly, creating a great explosion. The attack burned Lu Shang's body down to just bones, but he was still alive. He had barely recovered and was already being attacked again. His eyes widened in surprise and his attention fixed on something. Someone wearing boots and surrounded by golden martial energy appeared. Several powerful warriors appeared. The leader, who wore a mask and carried a sword, gave the order to his men to block the star region, adding that all members of the Crimson Eye pirate group must be eliminated without exception. Not a single one should be left alive. Upon hearing the order, they addressed him as Executor Full and nodded their heads. The men of Full began to search among the remains of the spaceship. While they were distracted, Lu Shang began to use the power of immortal cells to regenerate his body. He could not help but clench his teeth tightly and feel furious. He had worked so hard. He had prospered with effort, and with so much effort he had finally obtained a complete advanced ship as war booty. While Lu Shang's body was regenerating, he clenched his fist tightly and could not help but wonder if they did not know that this ship was his. His eyes began to shine with rage. He started shouting and asked them. They didn't know how much sweat he had shed for it, if they didn't know that he was saving everything to buy a habitable planet. Lu Shang made it clear that now they would have to compensate him. Upon hearing Lu Shang's voice, Lan's attention focused on him. Leaving him somewhat confused, he didn't know what was happening. With a calm gaze, Lan began adjusting the mask and started observing our boy carefully. While his mask was calculating Lu Shang's level, his eyes widened with curiosity as he observed the interstellar combat value. It was fixed at 153. He wondered if Lu Shang was still level 9, and since when did the Crimson Eye Star pirate group have level 9 members, or were they new? While Lu Shang's eyes were shining with rage, he began staring intently at Lan with a furious expression. Veins appeared on his face. He wanted to kill those bastards. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, a few minutes later, using his hand, Lu Shang began to break the door of the spaceship. This door was connected to a room which was filled with energy crystals. Lu Shang's attention was fixed on them and his eyes widened in surprise. Lu Shang began to carefully observe the mountain of energy crystals and his eyes started to shine with joy. He could not believe the immense fortune that the Star Pirate had managed to amass. He calculated that, at a minimum, there were hundreds of tons. An exorbitant amount if he considered that for his own advancement to level 9. He had only used a few hundred kilos. He could not help but smile upon realizing that in the spaceship there must be hundreds of tons. An amount that would be more than enough for him to cultivate tens of thousands of additional immortal cells. Lu Shang emerged from the spaceship, extended his hand and used his power, causing his energy to coil around it. He had to resort to this rough method, as he still didn't know how to pilot spaceships. But he was determined to take all the energy crystals back to the blue planet to count them calmly. With his body surrounded by blue energy, Lu Shang began descending toward the blue planet. Several minutes later, Lu Shang descended smoothly onto the planet and then placed Frando's spaceship on the ground. Our boy began dusting off his hands and with a serene gaze, let out a sigh. Just at that moment, his phone started to ring. Lushing took his phone out of his pocket and saw that he had a message from his mother. She revealed that she and his father had seen him on television. With a calm expression, Lushing decided to reply to the messages and asked his mother not to worry and decided to talk calmly once he returned home, revealing that he was still somewhat busy. The mother, who was somewhat worried, asked him to take care of himself and not get exhausted. Our boy promised to listen to her. After finishing the conversation, Lushing let out a sigh. He began to look to one side and his eyes started to shine with seriousness. Now that his identity had been revealed, he had no idea how he would explain to his family that he was the god of war. Finally, he decided that he would find the right moment to calmly tell them everything. Without wasting any more time, Lushing decided to enter Frando's spaceship. As he climbed the stairs, he reflected on the incredible harvest of this day, as he estimated that the total amount of energy crystal resources exceeded 700 tons. Lushing reached the room where the mountain of energy crystals was. He began to observe carefully. He noticed that there was also a special type of crystal. As he discovered that apart from a small portion which were raw energy minerals that he had already seen, the rest were blocks of already processed energy crystals. Lushing approached and while his eyes were shining with confusion, he grabbed one of the energy crystals. He had no idea what exactly he was holding in his hands. Energy began to emerge from the crystal. According to Lushing, the energy was incredibly violent, at least hundreds of times more powerful than that of a normal crystal. He realized that with his current power, he couldn't even refine and absorb it instantly, so he would have to do it slowly. It also seemed strange to him that there existed only less than 50 tons of this type. Lushing began walking around the spaceship until he reached some shelves where Frando's equipment was. He stopped walking. There were several interstellar combat suits and melee weapons, such as alloy swords. The suits were similar to Lancheng's. There was also a sword. Lushing's attention was fixed on it and his eyes were filled with amazement. He began to touch the glass of the shelf, realizing that it was not just any weapon, but an authentic level 10 melee weapon. The tip of the sword began to shine, and Lushing touched it with his finger. The tip of the sword was so sharp that it made a small cut on his finger. Green energy began to emerge from his hand. The eyes of our boy widened with curiosity. The energy managed to leave a mark on his skin, but it recovered instantly, which meant that the defense of his martial body was also level 10. The spaceship was full of capsules with strange creatures inside. There were also prisoners from many other planetary species. And our boy decided he would wait for Lancheng to arrive to ask him what to do with them. He also reflected on the journey to other systems. Although he could leave the planet with his own body, he recognized that in terms of speed he was no faster than a turtle in a space measured in light years. Therefore, for such journeys, he would still have to rely on spaceship technology. Lushing's eyes began to shine with seriousness. He knew that before leaving the blue planet, he had to clarify one thing: the origin of the crisis that would affect Earth in 8 years. The one that had been predicted in the drear space. He did not want to leave and then returned to find that everything had turned into a wasteland. With a calm gaze, Lushing called AI. Not long after, she began to manifest in front of our boy. Lushing's attention was fixed on her and his eyes widened in surprise. Everything else had disappeared, only she remained, to remind him that all of this had not been a dream. Lushing began to gaze toward the ground and ask the system to simulate his future. AI placed her hands over her chest and her eyes began to shine. And not long after, red windows from the system started floating around her. The system revealed the result of the simulation. He would become the martial patriarch of the blue planet. At 21 years old, he would leave his world to be the first genius in 100,000 years of the whiteness star sector. The following year, He would participate in the tournament of celestial chosen ones of the 5 stellar regions and obtain first place. At 40 years old, he would reach level 11 and rank among the top 100 in the tournament of the celestial serpent star system. The simulation extended much further, showing that at 100,000 years he would ascend to level 15, becoming Lord of the celestial serpent star system, only to finally perish at 300,000 years, along with the destruction of the universe. Upon seeing this, Lushing's eyes widened with fear and surprise. Reflecting on the result, he realized that according to the simulation, at 100,000 years he would reach level 15 and become Lord of the celestial serpent star system. But in the end, he too would perish alongside with collapse of universe. This led him to conclude that within next 300,000 years, at most, he'd reach level 15 without even reaching 16. However, a confident smile appeared on his face as he'd thought. The system was nothing more than a simulation. He was convinced that, with all inheritances he'd obtained, there was no way he'd remain stuck at that point. With a sad gaze, he asked the system to restart the simulation. AI extended her hands, and while her eyes were shining she began to simulate again the future of the blue planet. The system began to show how the blue planet would be destroyed, revealing that its end would come 8 years later, due to the invasion from the universe of the dark side. Lushing's eyes filled with fear, leaving him in shock, realizing that the problem was in the rift of the abyss. He understood that, within a period of 8 years, the blue planet would go from being a resource planet to a battlefield planet, and, finally, it would be completely destroyed. Lushing began to imagine his master from behind with closed eyes. He knew better than anyone that this invasion crisis was something that not even a powerful level 16 being, like his master, could stop. The image of the precious blue planet came to our boy's mind. He knew that the only thing he could do was find a new habitable planet for the inhabitants of the blue planet within 8 years and evacuate them. With a cheerful expression, Lushing clenched his fist. His small goal for this stage was clear: to buy a habitable planet that was big enough. At that moment, the spaceship door began to open and many warriors started walking toward our boy. Feeling this, he came out of his trance. Jing Yu closed her eyes and with a gaze full of admiration bowed her head before Lushing as a form of respect, calling him Lord Lushing. The other martial saints also did the same as her and showed their respect for Lushing. For the many martial saints of Blue Planet, Lushing had reached a simply unimaginable level. One that even surpassed that of the guide. They remembered how EJI could play with them like an adult with a baby, and yet Lushing had annihilated him and the others with the same ease as crushing a mosquito egg. They understood that, despite also being level 9, in front of Lushing, they couldn't even be considered ants. With eyes shining with joy, Lushing turned around, extended his hand and with a smile mentioned that regarding EJI, perhaps he had gone a little overboard. He acknowledged that his opponent had been too weak and doubted there was anything left of him, then added that he was also aware of the great losses they had suffered during those days. Then, Lushing extended his hand toward the energy crystals and, with a serene look, offered them to take a few tons as compensation, since, after all, they were the supplies of the Star Pirates. Upon hearing this, Jing Yu's eyes widened in surprise and fear. She couldn't help but sweat and panic at seeing so many energy crystals. She and the others were in shock, but with a smile. Lushing made it clear that it was not necessary for them to give him the crystals he had asked them to collect. Instead, he told them to divide them among themselves to increase their strength because for him what he already possessed was more than enough. With a grateful expression, Jing Yu bowed before Lushing, greeted him respectfully and mentioned that they could not dare to take so many resources. According to her, this amount was so large that, since the energy crystals were discovered, such an enormous sum had never been seen. With a cheerful smile, Lushing crossed his arms and explained that surpassing a martial saint was simply a matter of perspective. He urged them to take the crystals, telling them they had to think big, because otherwise they would not be able to live up to the cosmos in the future. Upon hearing the word perspective, Jing Yu's eyes widened with fear and surprise. She could not believe what Lushing had just said. In outer space, a starship was traveling at the speed of light. Inside was the leader of the Star Pirates, Crimson Eye. He put his hand on his chin and with a curious expression asked her what the result of the scan was. With a serene expression, the woman began to touch her ear and reported that they could confirm that the 3 ships were on that planet. She added that the energy scan showed 24 level 9 energy sources and no level 10 or higher had been detected. With a serious gaze, the leader asked if there was a possibility that they were hiding their energy. With eyes shining with excitement, she revealed that their ship, the Demonic Claw, was a level 11 ship, one of the best in every aspect, and for something to be able to hide from its sensors. In front of them there was a giant screen. They began to observe attentively and she mentioned that only a level 12 ship could achieve something like this, and it was impossible for such a small and unknown planet to possess such technology. The leader's eyes began to shine with curiosity. It was puzzling to him that the ships were there, but the people had disappeared without any being detected above level 11. He wondered if it would be possible that they had voluntarily cut off communication with them and what reason those 3 would have for abandoning them in such a determined way. He stood up and turned his back on the blue planet. He didn't understand it, but decided it didn't matter. In any case, it was time to recover the ships. Since at that distance it was possible to do so. The woman nodded her head and mentioned that the 3 spaceships were being forced to return. At the same time on the blue planet, Lu Shank and the Saints came out of Frando's spaceship and began talking among themselves. Not long after, the ship activated, and its thruster began to glow. Lu Shank's attention was fixed on it and his eyes filled with confusion and surprise. The ship began to fly, using his power. Lu Shank extended his hand and started to prevent it from flying away. He didn't know what was happening or if there was someone inside the ship. Jing Yu put her hand over her chest and with a serious gaze she revealed that there was no one inside the spaceship, and asked if Lu Shank had forgotten that they couldn't break through the ship's defenses. Lu Shank closed his eyes and decided to take a look. He activated his perception, and thanks to this, he could see a spaceship flying near the blue planet. He opened his eyes which began to shine with rage upon realizing that they were controlling the ships remotely. With disdain, he wondered if they really intended to recover something that he already considered his own. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part.
Many warriors had survived, but all were wounded. They stood up and began to approach our boy, who was standing and looking at the ground. His attention was fixed on Jinagyu and his eyes widened in surprise. He could not believe that she was saying it was very likely that Cumberland had not died. Jinagyu, who had her forehead full of blood and her body full of scratches, began to gaze at the ground with a sad expression and nodded her head. According to her, it was likely that Cumberland was alive. Not far from the area was Aegis' starship. Lushing turned around and began to observe it carefully. Jinagyu revealed that Aegis, the evil spear, left the martial saints on the brink of death and then locked them in his spaceship. But they could not break through the ship's defenses. While Lushing's eyes were shining with determination, he focused and began to stare at the ship, ready to attack. With a calm expression, Lushing attacked with a powerful cutting blast, which destroyed the ship's defenses as if nothing. The eyes of Jinagyu and the others filled with surprise and their jaws dropped. They could not believe that Lushing had broken through the spaceship's defenses so easily. With a joyful gaze, Lushing began to observe his hand and couldn't help but smile. According to him, the ship's defenses were strong, but breaking them had been like cracking a nut with his hand. While his eyes were shining with confidence, he extended his hand toward the spaceship and, with a smile, entrusted Jeonagyu with the mission of rescuing the people, explaining that he had matters to attend to. With a surprised expression, Jeonagyu struck her fist against her hand and nodded her head. She couldn't believe that Lushing was so powerful. Without wasting any more time, Lushing took momentum and began to ascend into space. All the warriors bowed before our boy and respectfully bid farewell to Lord Lushing. While Lushing's eyes were shining with seriousness, he focused and began to fly quickly. Not long after, with his body surrounded by martial energy, Lushing reached space. Our boy began to observe the blue planet. Seeing that he was stronger than AG, he came to the conclusion that AG's leader must be a level 10 warrior, or at most level 11. But it was unlikely that the leader could surpass a level 11 warrior. With a serene gaze, Lushing extended his hand. His power had increased so exaggeratedly that not even he himself was clear on how strong he was now. He closed his eyes and let out a sigh, and remembered that in space there was no air. Breathing, for him, was no longer something necessary but had only become a habit. With a curious look, Lushing began to observe his hand carefully. He reflected that habits could change, like smoking or drinking, and with the reconstruction of his body in star form. In a certain sense, he had completely ceased to be human, having entered into a totally new level of existence. The space was filled with stars. It was beautiful. He could absorb the cosmic energy from the firmament and fully unfold his spiritual form. With eyes shining with determination, Lushing began to emit purple martial energy. Our boy clenched his fists tightly, and his body began to release a huge amount of energy. Compared to the blue star, Lushing's martial spirit was gigantic, and compared to the martial spirit, our boy was like a small ant. He imagined a palm the size of a planet descending from heaven and thought it would be a scene comparable to Buddha's palm subduing sun Wukong. He longed that maybe one day he could come to equal gods and Buddha. Lushing's martial spirit began to gaze to one side. Our boy found one of EG's companions and hoped that warrior would be level 11. While Lushing's hand was releasing a suffocating aura, his eyes began to shine with excitement. According to him, killing that warrior by crushing him was going to be very boring. An evil smile spread across his face since, according to him, for a normal person, it would not be satisfying to kill a mosquito. With a curious gaze, Lushing put his hand under his chin and began to ponder. He decided that, taking advantage of that time, he would reorganize himself a little and also review the supreme treasure that his master had given him. Lushing extended his hand and a small galaxy appeared in his hand, realizing that it was the seat of the material universe on some other civilized planet. It had already gotten dark. This planet looked like Egypt and was full of pyramids. Inside the pyramid, a large number of men bowed before someone in silence. In front of them was the chubby one floating, eating a meat drumstick and drinking a milkshake. Beneath him were treasure chests filled with energy crystals. Still with food remains on his cheek, with an evil gaze, the chubby one began to observe the men and, with an arrogant smile, asked if this was all they had. The king, who was prostrated before him, began to tremble in fear and promised that they had already delivered the entire collection of treasures from their royal house. The chubby one began to observe him in silence. The king had his face full of scratches and was bleeding, with eyes full of fear and desperation. He explained, that they had only been able to gather this amount since the guide collected it once every 10 years. The chubby one grabbed the king by the neck. Upon seeing this, the king panicked and started screaming. While foam was emerging from the king's mouth, the chubby one's eyes began to shine with evil, and he couldn't help but smile. He asked the king not to try to deceive him, revealing that he was the one who liked violence the least. He threw the king's body, making it crash against a pillar. With an arrogant smile, he decided to forget about this matter since it was almost time to leave. If he delayed a little more, he could end up losing against his friends. The king began to bleed and no longer had strength to move. With a worried expression, the king's daughter came running closer to see if he was okay. With a furious gaze, the father called his daughter stupid and asked why she had gone out, giving her the order to go back into hiding. Upon hearing this, the daughter's eyes filled with tears of sadness. At that moment, the chubby man's hands grabbed the princess by the waist. Upon feeling this, she couldn't help but fall into confusion. He couldn't help laughing like a madman. He couldn't believe that the king had said they no longer had good merchandise. With an evil gaze, he mentioned that the princess was of great value. Upon hearing this, her eyes filled with fear. She couldn't help but cry, knowing that she was in danger. A beam of light began to abduct the chubby one back to his ship. With an arrogant smile, he asked the princess to forget about this planet. With a gaze full of fear and desperation, she began to ask her father for help. The father extended his hand and could only scream and ask him to give his daughter back. Once the chubby one entered his ship, it took off and moved away from the planet. Inside the ship were chests full of energy crystals and the princess tied up and hanging from the ceiling. She closed her eyes and began to cry since according to her he was very cruel. The chubby one who was sitting in his seat contacted his friend using the system window and with a smile asked Ghost how things were on his side. With a serious gaze, Ghost mentioned that everything was going well. They were about to return, but they needed to pay AG a visit. Upon hearing this, the chubby one's mind filled with confusion. He began to gaze toward the window and asked if this was true. Ghost's eyes began to shine with seriousness. Showing a locator, he revealed that AG's signal was fluctuating. He had disappeared, but the spaceship remained in the same place. At the same time, Lushing went into dream space. While the zombies were wandering around, with a serene expression, Lushing began walking through the area. Dream space was inside the seed, but the landscape was still as before. The only difference being that at base 1359 where the dream started, everything on this planet had disappeared, leaving only remains behind. Lushing put his hand on his chest and concentrated. He knew that everything that had happened in the past had been destroyed by his mentor and transformed into nutrients that had fused with his martial arts. Lushing activated the system. The ancient resource library still existed, and it was even more powerful. This was because it was no longer necessary to maintain those false images, deduce abilities, predict the future and explore resources, for that was the essence of the power of the resource library. With eyes shining with seriousness, Lushing began to imagine himself from the past, understanding that to speculate about the future, it was the power of the origin of the universe that was at work. The reason there had been a deviation before was simply because too little power from the origin had been mobilized, and the level explored was too superficial, which resulted in an incomplete deduction of information. Lushing began to look at his hand, and a strange energy started to emerge from it. He now possessed All the origin power of this planet, although that only represented such an insignificant amount of the total origin power of the universe that countless zeros would be needed before reaching. Lushing clenched his fists and his eyes began to shine with joy. If he wanted to reach level 16 or even higher in the future and truly wanted to save this universe from disaster, he had to completely refine the origin power of this universe. With an excited smile, Lushing struck his fist against his hand before he could clear a street or a base. But now what he needed was to clear planets one by one, and even planets throughout the entire universe. Since his 10 perfect martial arts required an enormous amount of origin accumulation, Lushing began to float through space with several planets beneath him. He had completely absorbed the essence of that planet, and he did not dare to imagine how magnificent it would be if that reach expanded to the universe, nor how powerful he would be if that day really came. Lushing began to gaze toward the ground, and a smile spread across his face. With an excited expression, Lushing clenched his fist. Perhaps he could truly become the symbolic representative of the word martial arts. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part. Not far from the area, there was another beautiful planet similar to the blue planet. With a serious expression, Lusheng used his power and martial fire began to emerge from his eyes. Lusheng extended his hands and with a smile began to release his power. His spiritual power was at level 11, although he had no idea what level his stellar martial body equaled. Lusheng placed his hand on top of his chest, and his eyes widened with seriousness. He knew that his martial arts had also evolved greatly after merging with the paths of his masters, but it was impossible for him to clearly describe his current level. The gain had been immense, and fully assimilating it would require a long and deep process. Lusheng's attention was fixed on one of the planets, and his eyes began to shine with joy, making a smile appear on his face. He decided to organize it as he advanced step by step on his. At that moment, Lusheng's eyes were filled with seriousness, and his mind was filled with curiosity since something caught his attention. Not long after, his eyes began to shine with joy again, and a smile spread across his face upon noticing that another outsider was coming toward him. With an angry expression, he clenched his fist and decided to use them as guinea pigs for his experiments. In the vast stellar space, tens of thousands of light kilometers from the blue planet were the spaceships of the fat man and the long-haired man traveling at high speed toward his coordinates. While the fat man was eating another meat thigh, the long-haired man, who was sitting in a chair, began to observe him closely, called him Frando, and asked what he thought about this matter. In Frando's spaceship was the princess lying on the floor, with her clothes torn. The fat man had already spent quite some time with her. He took a bite of his meat, and with a serene gaze mentioned that there was no choice but to go directly to where Agee's trail had been lost. He speculated that maybe he had run into a patrol of Star Police and perhaps they had already killed him. The long-haired man couldn't help but smile, and his eyes began to shine with malice. According to him, if Agee was dead, it would be good, since that way they wouldn't have to share the loot with him. Frando began to observe the system window and couldn't help but smile, explaining that in any case they should go take a look and report the situation to the boss, giving the order to depart. The spaceships activated the space jump and set course for the galaxy where Lushing's blue planet was located. Several minutes later, the ships arrived at the blue planet. With a joyful gaze, the long-haired man pressed the button of the ship and with a smile mentioned that this blue planet was really beautiful and decided to first activate the energy scan. The spaceship began to scan the blue planet. The man began to observe attentively and the system revealed that it had detected an energy source of level 9 and above. Frando put his hand under his chin and with a confused gaze mentioned that this was strange. The attention of the long-haired man was fixed on the system window and his mind was filled with curiosity. He did not know what was happening. Frando's face filled with sweat and his eyes widened in fear since he knew that AG's ship was clearly on the planet, but the scan showed no energy source of level 10 or higher. He wondered if AG had abandoned the ship and fled. The long-haired man's eyes widened with seriousness and with a confident smile he made it clear that AG's death or escape didn't matter. As long as they weren't star police. The essential thing was to recover the ship in order to report. After saying this, he began to show an arrogant gaze. Upon hearing this, a smile appeared on Frando's face since he thought that he was right. With an evil smile, Frando began to rub his hands. The eyes of the long-haired man began to shine with wickedness and with a smile he mentioned that now they could also loot this planet. He began to imagine Jules and the members of his team as members of the infamous Crimson Eye Star pirate clan, known on several planets, were very cold. For them, the life or death of their companions did not matter at all. As long as their own life and money were safe, everything else was irrelevant. He stood up, walked away from the system panel and with a smile decided to descend to the blue planet. Just then, the ship's system issued a notification. Upon hearing this, his attention was fixed on it and his eyes widened with curiosity. Once he turned around, the system began to scan the blue planet and revealed that a new energy source had been detected. The result of the initial scan had been incorrect, so a new scan was being performed. His eyes filled with confusion, as he did not know what was happening. Not long after, the system revealed that an energy source of level 10 or higher had been detected. The system started scanning again and revealed that a power source of 1110 or higher had been detected. Not long after, the system reported that the scan result was wrong, so a new scan was being performed. The system started going crazy. He placed his hands on the panel and with a confused gaze began to wonder why the system was failing. He turned around and with a serious expression informed Frando that his radar seemed to have detected a level 10 warrior. Upon hearing this, Frando felt confused since his system had not detected anything, while his eyes were shining. With confidence, he began to shake his head, extended his hands and with a smile explained to Gishi that in such a miserable place as this one, it was impossible for a level 10 warrior to appear, so it surely was a system failure. Just then, Frando's eyes filled with curiosity and confusion as something caught his attention. Behind the blue planet, a powerful martial energy began to emerge. Not long after, a giant star in the shape of a sun appeared behind the blue planet. The attention of Frando and Gishi was fixed on it, their eyes filled with fear. and their jaws dropped in confusion. They did not know what was happening. The star passed over the blue planet and began to approach at great speed toward their spaceships. Frando and Gishi panicked, realizing that it was the sun. With eyes full of fear, Gishi swallowed saliva and began to sweat like crazy. He wondered what was happening, since a star so close to a habitable planet could not be something normal. Frando began to sweat like a madman, and with a furious gaze he realized that it was not a star, but some kind of divine martial ability. The sun began to expand and, little by little, it started to explode. Frando's attention fixed on it, and his mind filled with fear. Upon realizing that there was a human silhouette inside the star. Once the sun exploded, Lu Xing emerged with his body surrounded by martial fire and began to advance toward them. His eyes began to shine with excitement, and a smile spread across his face. He made it clear that, in front of the blue planet, space trash was forbidden from passing through. Frando began to lose his mind, and with a nervous gaze started shouting, asking Gishi to flee. He felt confused since he didn't know what was happening. They turned on their spaceships, and without hesitating for a second, they turned their backs on the blue planet and began to flee. Frando, who was controlling his spaceship, clenched his teeth and felt furious. At that moment, he understood the terrible truth about AG's death, realizing that they were facing a true monster. With a look full of fear, he turned toward Lu Xing, realizing that he had at least the power of an 11th level warrior. Immediately, he decided to make a space jump to escape and return to inform the chief. While little by little their spaceships were moving away, Lu Xing began to observe attentively. In silence, Lu Xing extended his hand toward them, and while his eyes were shining with excitement, he activated his mental power and could not help but smile. Now that they had arrived, it was clear there was no reason to leave now. Lu Xing's martial energy began to take effect, and little by little Frando began to bleed from the mouth. With a confused gaze full of fear, he realized that this was martial power. Gishi began to vomit blood, and his eyes widened in terror, realizing that this was the spiritual power of a level 11 warrior. Not long after, Frando collapsed to the ground, wondering who that spiritual warrior with such immense power really was. At that moment, with his body surrounded by blue martial energy, Lu Xing appeared on his ship and began to observe him silently with a curious gaze. Thar Boi began to stare intently at Frando with a piercing expression. For him, those below level 11 were as easy to eliminate as cutting grass. He barely touched their souls and extinguished them immediately. He realized that, without noticing it, he had grown to that level. At the same time, aboard the claw of the Star Pirate clan, deep in distant space, there was a man with purple hair sitting with his hand resting on his head and sunk in his thoughts. He was the Crimson Eye, the leader of the Star Pirates. His eyes began to shine with rage, since Gishi and Frando had also lost contact. A woman with brown hair who was holding a tray with a glass appeared, and upon hearing this, her eyes filled with confusion. The leader turned toward her and began to observe her in silence. He stood up and, with a curious gaze, activated the spaceship's system, causing it to start showing the blue planet. He couldn't believe that a small planet with level 1 resources had managed to make Gishi. And the others, 3 level 10 warriors, disappear without a trace. The woman crossed her arms and, with a confused expression, thought it was the work of the Star Police. The leader's eyes began to shine seriously. For him, it was not very likely that it was about the Star Police, because even if a large contingent arrived, his men would not have stopped sending at least one signal. Most likely they had been eliminated in an instant. Upon hearing this, her eyes filled with fear and she couldn't help but panic. With an uncertain expression, the leader decided to go take a look. With eyes full of terror and concern, she also decided to go with him. The leader's eyes began to shine with evil and a smile spread across his face. He felt calm as he believed he had an ace up his sleeve. Even if a level 11 warrior at their peak came to catch him, he trusted in having the strength to come out unscathed. They had lost 3 people for no reason at all. Something that had never happened before, so he had to find out what had happened. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part.
Lu Shang put his hands into his pockets, and while his body was releasing martial fire, he began to fly through the sky toward the city. His eyes began to shine with seriousness. He extended his hand and fixed his attention, realizing that he could no longer continue gathering power. If he continued, he would completely exhaust the energy of heaven, earth, and nature of his planet, which would cause his world to fall into absolute silence. It was already night and the sky was full of stars. With a calm expression, Lu Shang began to contemplate the precious sky and sank into his thoughts. It was just as Lan Chen had said. The small blue planet could no longer contain him, and the vast stellar universe was going to be his stage from now on. Our boy closed his eyes and clenched his fist tightly. He didn't know if with the power he had now, he could destroy a planet with a single blow. He realized that he was still far from being able to destroy a planet, since a planet wasn't like an egg, where breaking the shell would make the liquid spill out. He knew that the inside of the planet was the most resistant part. His eyes widened with joy and his attention focused on his fist. He was getting carried away. He had just reached level 9 and was already thinking about destroying planets. At that moment, the voice of someone asking for help began to sound in his head. Lu Shang started to gaze toward the ground, and his eyes widened in fear and confusion upon noticing that many voices were asking for help. He became curious to know what was happening. Lu Shang was able to see one of the cities that was being attacked by a Ji's army. The ground was filled with corpses, and a mother with tears in her eyes was hugging her daughter. Now that even the martial saints had been defeated, no one knew who would be able to save them. With faces full of fear and despair, the survivors opened their mouths and began to scream for help. Upon hearing this, Lu Shang's eyes widened in surprise and his jaw dropped in shock. Our boy closed his eyes and concentrated, causing blue martial energy to begin emerging from his body. He decided to activate his spiritual energy. Lu Shang's energy began expanding throughout the area, scanning all the terrain. Lu Shang was so strong that his energy began to expand throughout the country. Until several seconds later, it covered the entire planet. He had planned to scan the whole planet using his spiritual energy. Somewhere else was a Ji holding Zhenyu, who was injured in the head. While Iji's eyes were shining with evil, with a smile, he extended his hand and revealed that the guardian gods in whom humans trusted were nothing but weaklings. Iji tightly grabbed Zhenyu by the head. Her face was full of wounds and the mask she wore was broken. No matter how many times Iji experienced this sensation, it always made him enjoy it greatly. Iji opened his mouth and started laughing, since he always found satisfaction in seeing how the natives of an inferior civilization trembled before an overwhelming power. With their faces full of fear, he approached Zhenyu and with an evil smile, called the humans weak but stubborn. Zhenyu, who was injured, did not say a single word. She knew she could do nothing. His eyes began to shine with rage. because if it weren't for the bet he had with his two friends, he could continue enjoying destroying the planet for another month. He grabbed her head tightly, and with a serious gaze decided to repeat it one last time, giving them the order to hand over all the planet's resources. His eyes filled with evil and a confident smile spread across his face as he made it clear that otherwise, he would destroy all civilizations on the planet at a rate of 1 city per hour and kill everyone. Zhenyu was so injured that she lost consciousness. IG let go of her head and asked them to hurry up and bring all the planet's resources. Zhenyu's body began to descend from the sky until it crashed into the ground. IG mentioned that destroying civilizations was also a rather tedious and boring task. Zhenyu's body collapsed forcefully against the ground, shattering it into pieces. Upon seeing this, everyone panicked, knowing they were doomed. Just then, a man began to point toward the sky, and with a surprised expression asked everyone to look. They all raised their heads and began to look toward the sky, causing their eyes to widen in confusion and surprise. Their jaws dropped in shock, since no one knew what was happening. IG began to stare at them with a serious gaze, and couldn't help but wonder why they were all looking at him. He didn't know if they were no longer afraid of dying. His eyes widened in fear and surprise, realizing that they weren't looking at him, but were looking at something that was above his head. Just then, a powerful burst of martial energy began to descend from the sky toward IG. He turned around and upon seeing this, his eyes filled with confusion, leaving him in shock. IG's attention was fixed on it. He could not help but feel fear since he did not know what was happening. His eyes began to shine with surprise and his jaw dropped when realizing that it was not a burst of energy but a hand, a giant hand. A powerful martial hand made of golden energy appeared and began to descend toward IG compared to it. IG looked like an ant. He was confused as he did not know how it was possible for someone so powerful to exist on this planet. The finger of the martial spirit began to forcefully descend toward IG as the attack was approaching. He put his arms over his head and with a furious gaze realized that the martial spirit was very powerful. He did not know who the user was. Using all his power, IG tried to stop the attack. But his eyes widened in fear. He could not help but start screaming in rage since he wasn't even able to stop the attack. Several martial energies began to emerge from the hand, killing IG instantly. IG was furious since even at the moment of his death, he could not know who the user was. The attention of the Marshal of the West was fixed on the martial hand and his eyes were filled with surprise. He could not believe that IG, a fierce and unstoppable alien invader, had died in an instant. The eyes of the Marshal of the Central District widened with joy. The martial hand had crushed IG as if he were a mosquito. He did not know what had happened. The face of the other Marzical was filled with sweat and joy. He couldn't help but wonder if the gods really existed. But he quickly convinced himself that they did. He was sure that a deity had manifested. The Jade Emperor had not stood idly by and had come to save them. With a smile, the warriors raised their fists and began to celebrate IG's death. And even though they had no idea what had happened, they were joyful. Jinyu, whose body was full of blood and wounds, sat on the ground and rested one hand on it. Her attention fixed on the sky and her eyes filled with tears of happiness. She didn't know how the battle had ended so suddenly. She lifted her head and her eyes filled with curiosity. She did not know who had been the one who had killed IG. In the sky a curtain of smoke formed and while it was disappearing, the figure of someone began to appear. Not long after, a warrior appeared and above him, a powerful fire phoenix began to flap its wings. The warrior clenched his fists and began to gaze toward the ground in silence. At first she thought he was a god, but then she realized that the silhouette was quite familiar. Her eyes widened in surprise and tears as she realized that it was Lu Sheng. Our boy descended gracefully to the ground and began to walk toward her. With a serene expression, Lu Sheng took her by the hands, began to look into her eyes, and realized that she had suffered a lot. Jinyu remained silent, not knowing what to say. Lu Sheng took her by the hand and helped her stand up. A group of injured warriors began walking toward them. The attention of the purple-haired man was fixed on Lu Sheng and his eyes filled with surprise. He could not believe that Lu Sheng had killed IG without knowing if he had reached level 9. In the Lu family mansion, the eyes of the sister who was watching TV widened in surprise. She put her hands over her mouth and asked if it really was Lu Sheng. The attention of the parents who were standing behind focused on the TV, and their minds filled with curiosity. With a confused gaze, the mother put her hand over her mouth and couldn't help but sweat. She couldn't believe that Lu Sheng was so great. The father's eyes widened in confusion, and he couldn't help but be left open-mouthed. At the same time, Lu Sheng's friend was also watching TV. She started to sweat upon seeing that Lu Sheng had defeated IG. The master, who had a beard and was sitting watching TV, began to stroke his beard and felt surprised upon seeing Lu Sheng. Lu Kaming clenched his fists and went into shock. He couldn't believe that Lu Sheng was the god of war. With eyes shining with joy, Lu Sheng extended his hands and with a smile apologized for arriving late, explaining that he had just come out of seclusion. All the warriors began to observe our boy in silence, not knowing what to say. Zhenyu, who had her eyes closed, began to ponder an enemy whom none of them, the martial saints, had been able to defeat had been crushed by Lu Sheng without him even seeing it. She considered that too absurd, since not even the evil spear knew who had killed it. She wondered if Lu Sheng was still human, and if it was reasonable for someone who had just reached level 9 to be able to kill a peak level 10. She approached Lu Sheng and with a curious gaze asked what height his martial spirit had. Upon hearing her voice, Lu Sheng's attention focused on her and his eyes filled with surprise. Lu Sheng extended his hand and with a serene gaze mentioned that he had not yet tried to fully unleash his martial spirit, because drawing power from the heavens and the earth was too immense and could destroy the foundations of the blue planet. He had to go with Lanching to obtain more advanced resources before he could know. Zhenyu stood up and remained silent. With a joyful gaze, the southern marshal raised his fist and declared that Lu Sheng was the god of war and the savior of humanity. The central district marshal began to gaze at Lu Sheng in silence. They had finally witnessed the birth of history, and according to them, Lu Sheng was very powerful. The eyes of the black-haired man widened in confusion upon realizing that the handsome Lu Sheng was none other than the legendary martial saint of Dragon Nation. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention turned to our boy. They all started running toward him. Seeing this, Lu Sheng panicked. Everyone surrounded Lu Sheng and raised their fists, saying that he was the strongest. Our boy's eyes filled with surprise. He didn't know what was happening. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, with eyes shining with joy, Lu Sheng stood up, clenched his fist and with a smile declared himself as the supreme being of heaven and earth. Lu Sheng stuck out his tongue, and with an embarrassed gaze began to touch his head with his hand. He realized that he was being very childish, but luckily he was in the depths of the sea. If he had said that in front of someone, he would have died of embarrassment. He decided to get excited alone in secret. His eyes widened seriously as something caught his attention, realizing that something was not right. While blue martial energy was emerging from his body with a serious expression, Lu Sheng began to observe his hand. He felt that the immortal cells inside his body were growing uncontrollably. Inside his body, the immortal cells were duplicating, their number increasing at an alarming rate, and they devoured his energy like a hungry child who could not be satisfied. Lu Sheng focused and snapped his fingers, making pink energy appear around his hand. Not long after, a giant energy crystal descended into the depths of the sea right in front of Lu Sheng. Our boy began to observe it in silence. His eyes expanded with tranquility and he started walking toward it. The crystal began to shine intensely. This energy crystal weighed 500 kilograms that he had obtained during the tournament. He had thought it would last him a long time, but he never imagined that he would use up all his reserves of energy crystals at once. Lu Sheng reached out his hand and touched the energy crystal. He decided it was time to refine it. An explosion of energy destroyed the energy crystal, and Lu Sheng simply stood watching in silence. As little by little his energy was entering the energy crystal, Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine with joy and a smile spread across his face. He felt that the number of immortal cells had suddenly increased to 3,650. Lu Sheng's eyes widened with excitement, as he had even built with the immortal cells inside his body a complex and mysterious star map of the sun god domain. In that instant, he had surpassed by almost 1,000 times what he had achieved before. His energy began to enter the energy crystal, and a powerful wave of energy began to emerge from it, which started to spread throughout the bottom of the sea. The explosion created a curtain of smoke, and as it was slowly disappearing, Lu Sheng began to look toward the ground with a lost gaze. With a serene gaze, he couldn't help but smile since he had made the immortal cells develop into stars, and within those stars he had cultivated the golden bird. Not to mention that he also had the domains of Wang Hai and Duan Yefeng. Lu Sheng extended his hand and his attention was fixed on it, causing his eyes to widen in surprise. He had forgotten a small thing. In the palm of his hand there was a demonic eye, which was staring intently at our boy. He knew that he could not abandon the path of alien cells. Maybe he could use them to understand information from the dark side of the universe, and perhaps they would become the key to breaking through stagnation in the future. Lu Sheng couldn't help but smile and his eyes filled with confidence, as it was now time to begin with his martial seal and his martial face. With a serene gaze, Lu Sheng brought his hands together. Although he had deduced with his Master V complete paths up to level 15, and even one path to level 16, that was still just a floating castle. He still had to ascend from level 9. Our boy relaxed and closed his eyes. He understood that mortals sought the gods and warriors sought themselves. His true martial face had to be based on himself, with a face identical to his own, for he proclaimed himself as the god. Green energy appeared around his body and little by little Lu Sheng began to float. He knew that the body of the martial face was going to be created with the path of the divine crystal. With the divine crystal as body, Lu Sheng extended his hands and green energy began to circulate throughout his body. Regarding the matter of the path, he decided to use the path of the star as his eyes, and his master's natural path as a robe. Lu Sheng focused, and a powerful martial energy began to emerge from his body. He was going to use the crystal as a body, the golden bird as eyes, the 4 symbols as a robe, and the various paths as a curtain. Lu Sheng opened his eyes, and his mind filled with curiosity as something caught his attention. He decided to summon his martial aspect, body of the martial aspect of the 4 extremes of flame of the true martial god. Lu Sheng's energy emerged from the sea and shot up into the sky. Meanwhile in Dragon Realm, IG's martial spirit that had a demon form began spewing fire from its mouth and destroying everything in its path. The eyes of the city's inhabitants filled with fear. They began to flee and call for help. While IG's eyes were shining with evil, he extended his hand, and with a smile asked them to stop hiding. While everyone was running for their lives not long after, Zhengyu arrived in the city, and she couldn't help but feel furious upon seeing how powerful IG was. The other martial saints also arrived in the city. Tan Zhongwu, who had his hands behind his back, began to gaze at IG in silence. Zhengyu clenched her fists and with an angry expression revealed that this was the 3rd city destroyed by IG. She knew that if they didn't do something, the entire Dragon Kingdom would be reduced to ruins. Tan Zhongwu's eyes filled with seriousness. He knew they could not keep running. With an expression full of determination, he began to stare at IG and drew his sword like gods among men. They had to assume the responsibilities of gods among men, and even if they could only stop the evil spear for an instant, they had to do it without hesitation. With his face covered in sweat, the warrior who was behind Zhengyu extended his hand, and with an expression full of fear, remembered that Lu Shang had surpassed the martial saint. He asked if Lu Shang still hadn't come out of seclusion. Zhengyu's attention was fixed on IG with a calm expression. She said that Lu Shang still had not come out of his seclusion. Tan Zhongwu swung his sword forcefully and decided not to force the warriors who wanted to wait to fight. He gathered momentum and began to advance quickly toward IG. He made it clear that he could also face a powerful enemy like a martial saint, and even if he died in the act, he would not regret it. While IG's martial spirit was flying in the sky, Tan Zhongwu shot toward it. Zhengyu began to observe silently. She could not believe what her eyes were seeing. She took out her mobile phone, turned to the others, and with a calm expression revealed that Martial Saint Minju had already entered into combat, and as one of the guardian martial saints of the Dragon Realm, she also had to do so. She had already informed Lady Dong and asked her to urge Master Lu Shang to come out of seclusion. She made it clear that they were all martial saints from different nations, so she was not going to force them to join the battle. She only hoped they understood that if the lip falls, The teeth will not survive. The martial saints clenched their fists and remained silent. Zhengyu leapt forward and began advancing toward Ig, the eyes of the martial saint who had a scar on his face filled with fury. He knew that this was no longer a matter of each country's interests. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention turned to him. Everyone felt frustrated and began to think about the blue star. Without losing another second, all the martial saints were filled with determination and began to fly toward Ig. They were willing to fight for the blue star. Seeing this, the citizens couldn't help but feel joyful and relieved. With eyes full of tears, one of them began to point toward the sky and revealed that the martial saints had come to save them. The bald man couldn't help but cry and thought they were saved. A tear of emotion appeared in Ig's eye. He began to crack his fingers and felt moved to see that finally the martial saints had deigned to come out. But then his eyes began to shine with evil, and with a smile he decided to kill them. While little by little the martial saints were getting closer, he extended his hand and couldn't help but smile. Ig's martial spirit attacked them forcefully, and as the scene shifts, we can see that on the coast of Ninghai there was a fishing boat. Inside the ship, there was a family who was watching television attentively. The television began to show how all the martial saints were being massacred. Upon seeing this, the father felt fear. Now that not even all the martial saints in the world had been able to stand up to Ig, he didn't know who was going to save them now. With eyes shining with determination, the son clenched his teeth and grabbed his trident. The father's attention fixed on him and his eyes widened in surprise and confusion. The son wanted to fight, but the father extended his hand and made it clear that the monster Ig hadn't even been defeated by a level 9 martial saint. His son had only been training for a few years. He couldn't believe he thought he was Ultraman reincarnated. He promised that if his son ran away again, he would give him a beating. Upon hearing this, the son turned around and his eyes filled with fear. Just then something caught his attention and his face turned pale with shock, causing his jaw to drop. With a surprised expression, he asked his father to turn around. With a confused expression, the father decided to obey. Near the ship, a tornado of martial energy appeared and began to sweep away everything in its path. With his face full of fear, the father knelt before the tornado and thought that the Dragon King was furious. He began to beg for forgiveness. The son who was standing next to him remained watching it in silence. His eyes widened in confusion as he could see a person inside the tornado. With a furious gaze, the father clenched his fist and asked his son to stop saying nonsense. The tornado disappeared, revealing someone dazzling. As the curtain of smoke was fading, someone stepped out with their foot. The father's attention fixed on them and his eyes widened in fear and surprise. This person was none other than Lu Sheng. While his body was releasing martial fire, Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine with rage and the father thought that he was a god. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, while Lu Sheng's body was emitting a powerful blue energy, he extended his hands and his eyes began to shine with joy, causing a smile to appear on his face. The power of the masters had now fused with his body. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in confusion and his mind filled with many questions. The bodies of Yang Yizhuo, Wang Hai and Duan Yifeng began to disappear with the wind, transforming into dust. Before disappearing, the three began to show a proud smile. Lu Sheng's attention focused on them, and he could not help but feel somewhat confused. A strange blue energy began to swirl around his body and Yang Yizhuo mentioned that from now on, everything depended on Lu Sheng. If destiny allowed it, they would meet again. The eyes of our boy widened with sadness and surprise. He did not know what was happening. Lu Sheng closed his eyes and began to cry in sadness. Not long after, Lu Sheng fell to the ground. He could feel an ocean of energy filling his body. He closed his eyes and concentrated to channel the energy. Several seconds later, Lu Sheng opened his eyes and his attention focused on the energy that was emerging from his hand. Countless understandings and revelations flooded his mind. He already mastered 2 level 15 Daos and 1 level 16 Dao in addition to countless Daos of other levels. His foundation in the martial path had risen to an unimaginable level, billions of times higher than before. Now he had a talent never seen before in history. With an expression full of determination, Lu Sheng tightly clenched his fists. His eyes began to shine with excitement and a smile spread across his face. Now, at last, he had the true qualification to try to forge a path, a perfect Tao that belonged entirely to him. Lu Sheng sat on the ground and decided to concentrate. His eyes were filled with determination and confidence since his power was growing by leaps and bounds. He decided to return to reality once he had fully assimilated everything. Our boy concentrated and all the martial energies began to emerge from his body. When that moment came, he was going to reach true transcendence. At the same time on Earth it was daytime and somewhere was the mansion of Lu Sheng's family. Inside the mansion, more precisely in the living room, someone was watching television, which was showing a city in chaos. Lu Sheng's parents were sitting on the sofa. With eyes full of fear, the mother placed her hand on the father's shoulder and couldn't help but feel afraid. The father took out the remote and with a confused expression couldn't help but wonder why the planet was being invaded by an advanced civilization, realizing that the world was about to plunge into chaos. While the father was smoking and watching television with a serious gaze, the mother's eyes widened in confusion. She thought all this was a lie since the scenes looked like they were taken from a movie. Just then, a great explosion occurred, devastating the entire city with a confident gaze. The father made it clear that Channel 1 would not make this kind of joke. Lu Sheng's sister, who was carrying her school backpack on her shoulder, arrived. Her attention fixed on their parents, and with a serious gaze she revealed that classes at school had been suspended. On the internet everyone was talking about this and many videos showed that it really was an alien invasion. At the same time, with eyes shining with rage, IG's martial spirit forcefully swung his arm, destroying everything in his path. The most powerful martial saints tried to attack, but with a simple movement, IG's martial spirit cut their bodies into pieces, causing them terrible pain. While IG's eyes were shining with evil, with a smile he made it clear that no one was going to be able to escape. Lu Sheng's sister approached the parents who were sitting on the couch watching television. She put her hands over her chest and couldn't help but feel fear. The mother put her hand over her chest and panicked. Meanwhile, on the other side, with a confident gaze, the father revealed that IG's strength was at a different level from the warriors of the Blue Planet. With eyes full of fear and terror, the mother couldn't help but wonder if the apocalypse was about to arrive. The father's eyes began to shine with confidence, and with a smile he asked his wife not to overthink it since that wasn't going to happen. Even if heaven collapsed, someone stronger would appear to hold it up. It wasn't something they, mere mortals, should worry about. With her face covered in sweat, the mother turned toward the father and began thinking silently. She panicked and with tears in her eyes revealed that this was what worried her most. Lu Sheng now held an important position within the army. She feared that the high command would send him to fight against IG. The father's attention focused on her and after thinking for a while, with a calm expression he asked her to stop thinking about meaningless things, since he didn't believe that even if the whole world united there wouldn't be at least one master who could defeat the aliens. He stood up and with eyes shining with confidence told her that they should trust the government, they should not complicate things for Lu Sheng. And the others, he decided to go out to buy provisions and at the same time look for a team to remodel the basement of the house and turn it into a bomb shelter. The sister's eyes filled with worry. The mother stood up and with a worried expression decided to go with him to help. At the same time, while the rays of sunlight were illuminating everything, somewhere in the Dragon Kingdom was the meeting room. With a serious gaze, Zheng Yu arrived and entered the villa. A soldier lowered his head before her and welcomed her. In the villa was also Lu Sheng's former master, who had his arms behind his back. He felt relieved to notice that she had arrived. With a curious expression, Zheng Yu turned her head toward him and asked how the situation was. Tan Zhongwu took out a tablet which had videos of a demon-shaped monster with wings killing humans. Zheng Yu's attention fixed on it, and she remained silent. Tan Zhongwu revealed that it was a newly arrived video from the Eagle Kingdom. 3 level 9 martial warriors had been defeated and more than 50 level 8 Grand Masters had been captured. His eyes began to shine with fear and seriousness when he revealed that up until now, they had already lost 5 level 9 martial masters on the Blue Star. With a curious gaze, Jung-yu put her hand on her chin and began to ponder. She suspected that this alien invader must possess extremely advanced detection devices to capture high-level martial artists so efficiently. Her eyes began to shine with seriousness when she realized that all of them had felt a strong sense of crisis lately. In times like this, when the lips disappeared, the teeth grew cold. They had to unite to face this threat together. The room was full of martial saints. The one with crossed arms mentioned that the alien invader was a true level 10 martial expert. At the same level as the guide, they were no match for IG and asked where Lu Shang was. Zheng-Yu's eyes began to shine with confidence and seriousness. She started staring at them and revealed that Lu Shang was in temporary seclusion, trying to advance to level 9. His cultivation place was in the sea. They didn't know when he would come out, and they also didn't want to interrupt him. She knew that Lu Shang still wasn't aware of what was happening outside. With a nervous expression, the brown-haired martial saint extended his hand and suggested asking for help from the guide, since he remembered that Lu Shang's wife, Snowy, had a communicator that could contact the guide. Just then, Snowy entered the room with the communicator in her hand. While her eyes were shining with seriousness, she revealed that she had already sent a request for help 3 days ago. The guide needed some time to arrive. He had said that they would try to gain as much time as possible. With an expression full of fear, the martial saint extended his hand and mentioned that if Lu Shang were present, maybe they could resist. But the problem was that they didn't know when he was going to come out of his seclusion. With a confused gaze, Snowy began to think she didn't know what to say. At that moment, someone placed their hand on top of the table. It was Jung-Yu. She crossed her arms and with a furious gaze made it clear that interrupting a seclusion was a great taboo in the martial path. If it affected Lu Shang's advancement, the consequences could be even more serious than the alien invasion. Snowy put her hand over her chest and remained silent. Zheng-Yu suggested trying to buy time by confronting the demonic spear until Lu Shang came out of seclusion. The martial saints began to look at each other and let out a sigh, knowing that they had no other option. At the same time, the guide's spaceship was traveling at high speed. Zhao Lin informed Lan Cheng that he was already very close to him. He was going to go with him to the Blue Star. He also revealed that Akatam and his people were not insignificant. He was worried that Lan Cheng would go alone and end up being an offering. Lan Cheng began to gaze toward the ground and with a serene expression mentioned that if this time they managed to successfully rescue Lu Shang, he was going to share with Zhao Lin the enormous favor that Lu Shang owed him. At the same time, at the bottom of the sea, Lu Shang sat on the ground and concentrated, making his martial spirit emerge from his body. The violet crystal humanoid figure of Lu Shang emitted strange white undulations. The entire crystal figure was transforming into white and then another transformation began. This time the white figure began to turn black. It was the humanoid figure with a black scythe of level 11 according to the crystal contemplation method. One of the inheritances from Duan Yefeng's level 15 divine crystal Dao. Lu Shang let out a sigh. His eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe that the level jump was so terrifying. From level 8 he had gone up to level 11. His martial strength had reached level 11. But he couldn't understand what came next. He didn't know if his current level was too low, realizing that everything else would only be unlocked when he fully raised all his levels. Lu Shang stood up and wiped off his pants using his hand. Now came the external martial body. His previous understanding of the Tao of Stars was too difficult. He believed that the diagram of immortal cell networks and stellar channels that he had created was quite good, but now saw that it was full of flaws and immature. To achieve it, he had to destroy and rebuild from scratch. Lu Shang closed his eyes and clenched his fist. He extended his hand and a flash ran through his entire body. The immortal cells began to manifest. Then all the cells in his body exploded in unison, causing him terrible pain. An ordinary martial artist would already be hopelessly dead, but Lu Shang was different. His martial body was being frantically reconstructed. Tendons and muscles grew one by one. Bones regenerated centimeter by centimeter. The entire skeleton shone with a radiant color, as if it were made of pure gold. Lu Shang opened his mouth and began to scream in agony. Several seconds later, he descended to the ground. His eyes began to shine with excitement and a strange energy began to emerge from his body. He had achieved it. He decided to call this Supreme Bone. It didn't matter if someone mocked him. He wasn't going to change the name, and he also wouldn't use the name Stellar Immortal Body anymore. With a smile, Lu Shang clenched his fist. From now on his constitution would be called Supreme Stellar Body, the Earth, and the 8 extremes of the universe. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,